If you have doubts about getting together with someone, is it about them or is it about you? Are you letting your own fears keep you away from the man you should be with? Or is your intuition screaming, you shouldn't be with that man? Well, let's talk about it, shall we? For those of you who are new here, we narrate, we analyze, we critique, we often judge, and we always pretend to know better and would do better. Hopefully. It's time to look into how Miranda and Steve's relationship is going. Are they passing that friendship and turning it into relationship, or will Miranda just be forced into it? But right now, Miranda is in a different kind of pickle. She's getting a laser eye surgery, and the doctor is informing her that she needs to have someone who's gonna pick her up after. The doctor doesn't know. The doctor does not know Miranda and how independent she is. She can take care of herself, even when she's half blind. Later that day, it looks like she's going on I can't really say date with Steve, because what the F are they? But I guess there's also a thing where you are friends who are dating. Miranda is telling Steve all about the surgery. And to be honest, she's being a little bit gruesome. Like, she's explaining how they flip the eye open and okay, I can't. Watch the show, she'll tell ya. Steve is listening to all of this and he is kind of getting worried. Is she sure she doesn't need any help after the surgery? Now, the way he said it, me don't like it. Want me to come down and hold your hand? To Miranda. Do you even know the woman? Like, if you offer me help, offer me help. Don't offer me help with attachment because you're so weak. Yes, I get it. It's a joke. But also, time and place, Steve. Obviously, it triggers Miranda. And she tells him that she doesn't need anyone to hold her hand. Thing is that Miranda is gonna ask Carrie. And Steve is butthurt. Why would she need to ask Carrie if he's right there offering her to help? Isn't he a friend? Oh, Stevie, you need to sit down. You need to chill. I don't get how Steve thinks that he is on the same level as Carrie, first of all, and second of all, that he should be on that level. No. The way you broke up with Miranda, you need some work to do before you get to any I trust you level, in my humble opinion. Now, I can understand like Steve's perspective, as in, she's rejecting his support and he automatically thinks that that's because she doesn't want to open up to him. She doesn't want to let him too close, right? But that is also very his perspective, his view. From her side, she can decide to ask help from whoever she wants to. Like, she doesn't owe anything to Steve. And the fact that Steve is acting butthurt because she doesn't let him in just shows how entitled he feels to become a part of Miranda's life in whatever way. In Steve's mind, he has the right to be close to Miranda, and Miranda should let him closer. I remember the first time probably, or back in the day when I watched Sex and the City, there was this notion of seeing Miranda as the B, right? As someone who is just closed off, she's so rude to him and so on. But looking at it today, with a fresh set of probably this thing here, this is clearly Miranda trying to have some set of boundaries when it comes to Steve. This whole thing turns into Miranda trying to justify why is she choosing Carrie as though she needs to. Miranda reminds him that they haven't really established what they are. And she asks him if he's gonna come upstairs. But Steve is upset. He doesn't really feel like coming upstairs right now. Yes, people, Steve is punishing Miranda for her setting her boundaries and choosing Carrie to help her instead of Steve. I cannot make this shit up. He is acting as though Miranda is this insensitive person that doesn't let him in, that is just closed off, and she is just using him for sex. Like, the way he positioned himself from being an asshole to making Miranda feel asshole-ish, some people know how to do it. And I would try to stay away from those type of people, but that's just me.
What are we doing here?
Again, very, very interesting how he flipped the scenario. He entered back into her life by trying to be friends because they should be friends. They have such a history together. To then being the one who's like, what are we doing here? What are we? Boy, you orchestrated everything. You know exactly what you're doing. But Miranda cuts him off and starts talking about the surgery again. Steve kisses her, and as we are used to in the show Sex and the City and probably 90% of our life, they play the avoidance game. Let's just kiss and make up and forget that we need to have an actual conversation. I do want to add here that when there is missing clarity, where you don't want to date someone and be confused about what the two of you are, bring it forward, talk about it. But also, don't dismiss if you're the one who from the get-go is pushing this person to be something more when they are clearly not ready. The sequence of guilt-tripping her into friendship, making a move on her while you were supposed to be just friends, to coming now and saying, what are we, just doesn't sit right with me. And at this point, as much as I see Steve as a very controlling, manipulative, and kind of person that I would stay away from, Miranda is not making herself any favors by avoiding conversations with him. But I see it more as a consequence of her actually not being sure, can she really trust Steve again because she was hurt in the past, rather than her just being simply avoidant and, trying to dismiss what he's saying. Another thing that I do wonder, obviously this is a show, fictional characters and so on, but if we say a person like Miranda could have reservations about talking with Steve because Steve is good at dismissing her fears. He always in some way makes her feel like she's the irrational one, that she is closed off, that she is too in her head. And maybe by default, then she doesn't feel confident that she can actually resist Steve's persuasion. Because so far it didn't work, right? Even them becoming friends, Steve kind of pushed her into it. So I wonder if on some level that could also be happening. Again, if this was a real person. It is the day of the surgery. And unfortunately, Carrie cannot accompany Miranda. Now, Miranda apparently doesn't have anyone in her life to help her. She's going to do it on her own. The surgery is over and Miranda is drugged out of her mind, barely seeing anything. Carrie?
Actually, no, it's me.
Yes, this is Steve. You know what happened? Carrie, the good friend she is, she called a person that Miranda was hurt by, that Miranda is in situationship with, to help her. Now, what kind of friend is that? I'm going to tell you what kind of friend is that. A TV show type of friend. I mean, thank God that her and Steve became something right before the surgery. Can you imagine? She would probably still be there waiting for someone to pick her up. Jesus Christ. The week writing continues, obviously, because otherwise we wouldn't be here bitching about it. So actually, thank you to the writers. But basically, Steve goes and helps Miranda. And the whole thing, the attitude is how Miranda doesn't want to be rescued, right? That's her problem. And totally neglecting the fact that there is a freaking reason why she might not feel like letting Steve in. She wakes up in the morning and Steve is sleeping next to her. And that's apparently the first time she finally sees clearly. And not because of the surgery. No. She sees clearly he really cares about her. He was there when she needed him. Now we are just focusing how Steve is the nice guy who at the end of the day sacrifices his time to help Miranda. Sure, Mary, sure. It does show us how when you are so focused on being independent and sourcing value from that, how easy it is to then be misguided, let's say, when someone does help you, because that will eventually happen, and then take that as some kind of a holy grail. It would be just normal. Thank you for helping me. I appreciate it. Him not feeling good enough because of Miranda's success, that's the problem. not him helping or not helping. But I guess that's how Steve is, right? He is very, very good when he can feel needed, when he can feel that Miranda depends on him somehow. But if she doesn't, if she has some sense of independency, oh, well, then he is just butthurt. Isn't that a dynamic we should stay away from? I vote yes. It's another day, and Steve and Miranda are walking from, I don't know, a date, a something, hanging out together. And Steve is trying to plan another date. So he is thinking about movies on Wednesday. But Miranda is a little bit hesitant. It's on Wednesday. It's during the week. She's not really sure she can do it. But don't worry, Steve is proposing Thursday if she cannot do it on Wednesday. That's closer to the weekend, right? Miranda, though, is hesitant again. She's a little bit shook at how Steve is just expecting her to be available whenever and they can plan stuff together.
Okay, maybe Thursday. I'll see.
Why, do you have plans?
She's having a date, huh? Sure, Steve, because the only reason she doesn't want to spend time with you is because there's another man in the picture. Miranda people is trying to set some clear boundaries with Steve, okay? She's trying to have some distance so she can have some space of trying to figure this shit out. He asks her who is she going on a date with. Come on, he's her friend. Why can't she just share it with him? Everything is so, come on, let's just do it with Steve. Miranda feels a little bit hesitant also because even if she had a date, she doesn't feel like Steve is the person she would tell about the date. It's a bit weird. Obviously, Steve is disappointed because, again, aren't they friends? At the end of the day, he's just trying to understand when is the next time he can see her again. The thing is, Steve is seeing just Miranda, and he honestly doesn't want to see anyone else. He actually wants to be exclusive with her. Miranda is a bit shook. She's a bit confused, like, where is this coming from? But Steve continues. Look, if we actually want to see this through, if we want to give us a chance, we should date only each other.
I see.
So there are a couple of things that I want to address here. The first thing is something that if you've been watching my videos, you already know. I don't get the whole multiple dating thing. I'm not capable of doing it. I need to be focused on one person. Also, because I think if you are intentionally dating, it is difficult to date more people. I mean, see how Love is Blind is fucked up. And I do appreciate that Steve himself doesn't want to continue dating other people when he is trying to have something with Miranda. Okay, all of that, I like it. I'm not saying that's the only way, but for me personally, it feels right. Hey, gorgeous. I know. Yes. For those of you who don't know, I'm actually a pet sitter. So in my video, you're always going to see some kind of dog or a cat jumping around. On the other hand, what I don't really appreciate is how all of this is going down. Because it looks like Steve is just trying to jump into the relationship with Miranda without acknowledging anything that happened in the past. And that's not the best approach. Now, of course, you could think that maybe Steve is trying to avoid the discomfort that may come with discussing how he felt about her success and so on. But nevertheless, man, the worst thing is that you just jump into something without acknowledging what happened. And I think in general, Steve is that type of a person. Miranda, though, is not so confident about giving exclusivity to Steve. Here's the thing. There is no other man right now in Miranda's life. But overall, she's not ready to just let Steve have it in some way. The narration in the show is alluding to how Miranda is not going to let Steve win just like that. That's how Carrie is narrating. But from my perspective, this was like a real scenario. I would say Miranda's body is screaming that this is not okay, that there's something missing here before they can do anything exclusive and anything more committed. The next day, she shares her doubts with Carrie. The thing is, there are so many good things about Steve, but there are also so many flaws. She's also trying to figure out if the best thing would be to just be honest with him and basically tell him, look, I'm not so sure because what if there's someone better out there? Yes, Mary, we can both agree that Miranda is being rude. On the other hand, when you have that feeling of if someone better is going to come along, I don't want to say that it's so much about you being, you know, entitled or thinking that you are better than. And I'm going to be honest, when the first time when I watched it, I was looking at Miranda and I was like, bitch, please. But the more detailed I get into trying to understand how this whole thing between her and Steve is going down or developing, the more I see it as a bit rude, but actually genuine reaction to not being actually sure about Steve, because they do have a history where he hurt her and they never really addressed it. So Steve wanting to just jump in while Miranda being hesitant, I don't think it has so much to do with Miranda thinking she's better than him. I think it's about the fact that he is not the best person to get into the relationship with when you yourself are struggling with, career and feeling valuable and worth it and not being perceived as not woman enough or whatever. Though she is expressing it in a very rude and not the best way. According to Carrie, the solution is simple. Miranda is very logical and very analytical person. So she should just do the good old list, the pros and cons, and see which side wins. I'm gonna be honest, between the two of us, if you need to do a list, I would say that there are problems that you need to address that you should be actually addressing, and it would help you understand if you want to be with this man or not. Whenever you're like 50-50 on a thing, maybe what would make it 100 on one side is if you would actually address what is it making 50-50 and work on that thing. So, Miranda, sweetie, the plus that would actually help you would be to address that you lost the trust of Steve because of what happened in the past. And that's the thing you need to work on. But Miranda goes with the list. And the first thing on the list is his dumb jokes. He's always making jokes when it's not appropriate, and that's a minus. On the other hand, his butt is cute, so that's a plus. Steve and Miranda are finishing yet another date between the sheets. Sex is amazing, according to Miranda and the writers. Steve also takes this opportunity to reassure Miranda that he is not expecting a quick answer when it comes to exclusivity. He just wanted to let her know that she really means a lot to him. He loves her.
You're the best woman I ever met.
Okay now. Why does it feel like he's not pushing, but he's actually pushing? It not sit right with me. Now, on one side, I want to acknowledge that, in my opinion, this is where Steve F's up. If I'm asking for exclusivity, then I also expect for you to tell me if you're ready or not ready. What I don't think is beneficial is for you to give exclusivity, but then say, you take your time. Take your time, figure shit out. I'm here whenever you need. I think it creates a lot of space for shit going down in a bad way. Instead of saying, you take your time, I would say, could you share with me what makes you feel like you don't want to be exclusive right now? What prevents you to want to commit and give this a real chance? Like, that would actually allow him to understand better, but also her, and then see, can they actually work on that? The worst thing is that you give an exclusivity, you commit from your side, you are patient to wait on the other person, and yet you don't have any answers. Why does the other person feel reluctant? Because if the other person feels reluctant because there's something between the two of you, then you can actually address it and figure it out. In this case, if Miranda would share with Steve that she basically doesn't feel she got over what happened in the past maybe, or she doesn't trust him, that they could actually work on this, that would give Steve a chance to clarify himself, to show how he did grow from what they experienced in the past. Or how he didn't. Maybe he could also recognize, why are you trying to again be with the woman when the situation didn't change? She is still more successful than you. Is that actually something you can work on and accept? Or you're hoping that that won't come up again? Now, his confession makes Miranda think about that list again. And suddenly, the pro part just outweighed the con. I guess it's a step towards trusting Steve more. You know, you can love people and still have problems. You can love someone and still don't put the effort in to solve the issues you have. You can love someone and those issues will still not disappear unless you actually address it. But that's just my 2 cents on it. It's a couple of days or the next day. Honestly, I'm not really sure with these timelines. But basically, Miranda is coming home from work. And there he is. Biz, Steve is on the couch watching a game. I do not know if back in the day that was normal. But how the F do you just crash at someone's place? She's also shook. She's like, what are you doing here? I didn't even expect that we are seeing each other tonight. But Steve's like, oh, I still have the key. You know, that time when you asked me to feed your cat? So I just let myself in. What in the you are crossing a line, mister, is going on here? It doesn't feel like he's okay. I know this is a show, but imagine you giving your key to a neighbor to take care of your plants, to water your plants when you're on vacation. And then you kind of forgot to get that key or they don't return it. And then one day you come from work and they're just sitting there and they're like, oh, I just wanted to hang out a little bit. So I just let myself in. Surprise. Let's be best friends. What about the whole I'm not going to pressure you thing? Well, this looks very, very pressuring. This looks like he just enters Miranda's life and trying to take over his territory. It just shows again how Steve does not really respect Miranda's decision, Miranda's life for that matter. For Steve, it's very simple. He already decided that he wants to be with Miranda in a relationship and he's gonna act like that. He's just waiting for Miranda to accept it, not to decide, to accept. Now, how freaking self-centered do you have to be to have that train of thought, to act in that way? Whoever wrote this plot and this scenario, I'm like, Biz, did you go through this? Do you have actual experience of this? And I am really, really sorry. I'm sorry you went through that because it's fucked up. It's giving condescending. Okay, I've said it before, but that's exactly how Steve is acting towards Miranda. He does not care about Miranda's time, about Miranda's life, about Miranda's decision. He already decided that Miranda is a little bit up in her head. She has a little bit of trust issues. She's a little bit closed off, but she'll get over it and she'll figure out that this is actually what she wants. Okay, period. I have to say that Miranda's reaction surprised me. Like, she was ecstatic. She was so happy seeing Steve there and get it together. Of course she wasn't. Who would be? And she actually tries to reestablish some of her own independency, some control in her own freaking home. She grabs the remote and she just frantically starts to change the channels, like just change. Obviously, the woman is under stress. And who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be under stress when you feel like someone is taking over your apartment and, for that matter, your life? And yet, if you say something, if you do something, you're just going to be considered as rude, as an insensitive because, well, this man loves her. This man wants to be exclusive with her. This man thinks that she is the greatest woman he ever met. So how can she have the audacity to try to not accept that? To tell him that, Steve, honey, like, I like spending time with you, but this is crossing a boundary. Like, let's calm down. It doesn't mean that I don't like you, but most definitely I don't like you just coming up to my house whenever you want, expecting that I'm gonna accept it. So she's like changing these channels and Steve is like,
Hey there, easy, Chief. You're making my brain hurt.
Hey, slow down, Chief. You're making my brain hurt. This whole scene is making my brain hurt. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the mastery of someone who is bossing you around and yet they found a way to make you feel like you are acting like too much of a boss when all you want to do is establish your freaking boundaries? I mean, they should write books about it. They probably did. As in, watch out for these signs of narcissism. Miranda also asked him, doesn't he have work tonight? Because clearly she feels uncomfortable him being there. She's trying to even evaluate if she wants to get back with Steve. And yet he just inserts himself into her life. And if she says anything, she's bossy. And this, it gets worse. You're not even ready for it. Steve takes the remote out of her hands and he says, but I have till 10 p.m. And basically they make love. I guess there are some perks at having Steve around. Or is that just illusion Miranda is falling into? Now, when it comes to Steve asserting himself like that, it almost feels like a manipulative tactic where he is trying to bring familiarity to their dynamics, right? They've already done this, so this is kind of comfortable, right? And at the same time, he's creating a feeling of them being closer or this relationship being deeper than it actually is. Because the reality is that the two of them have not mutually agreed on exclusivity and giving this relationship or the two of them a chance because Miranda has her doubts. But by him being already there when she comes home, by being almost every day together, by having this, we are together before he goes to work, he is creating a sense of relationship, a sense of we are already doing this. Look, why wouldn't we just be again back together when we already are? So from my point of view, all of this looks like him being very controlling under the disguise of this being casual and loving and just being there for her, just wanting to spend time with her. Also, what makes me doubt Steve is the fact that he is offering patience for Miranda to decide on her own, but it's not really consistent. He is actually pressuring her to make that decision. He wants to lock this down before addressing any actual problems. If he opens that topic, what about if they figure out and they understand that nothing is actually different? That there is still this power dynamic that he perceived just because she is more successful. And it basically threatens his manlyhood. Now, here's the thing. We're going to see how Steve does actually still feel that way. He still feels like Miranda is too of a man in this relationship because he himself is so insecure about what he brings to the table. Miranda is having lunch with the girls, but she kind of needs to ditch them because Steve is playing basketball, which gives Miranda exactly 3 hours to have the remote control for herself and basically some me time. Do we even need to say anything? Mary, do we need to discuss this? Do I even need to say for the 10th time how this is very problematic that she feels happy? She gets some time off from the man she's not even committed to yet. Are we serious? Now, one thing that I want to kind of clarify before people are like, that's totally normal if sometimes you need some time off your partner. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, shall we? I think there is a difference between spending time alone or wanting to be alone, being a part of a normal, healthy development and healthy self-care, or is it an escape from your partner and the influence this partner has on your life? I think that's the difference between, hold up, you need to take things in consideration, and I'm just having some me time. With Miranda, it is clear that she's kind of like, yes, I can finally have time for myself, not realizing that it is also her life. She shouldn't be grateful or excited about the fact that Steve doesn't have time, which means that she can finally do what she wants. That's problematic. So Miranda gets her time off, and in the evening, Steve returns, and I guess they go to sleep. But here's the thing. Miranda is not sleeping. No. She's sitting on the bed and she is clearly annoyed. You see, Steve is on her side. And you know what? I kind of understand Miranda. I think the majority of people understand Miranda. Also, I think how Miranda approaches discussing this with Steve is a little bit not the best. Okay? Not the best. You see, there is one thing when you notice that your partner is kind of waking you up because they're pushing on your side and you are looking at the doom, which is rolling off your bed because of it, and saying, babe, move, like you're in my side. And everything becomes just like a oopsie and you continue to sleep. It's another thing when Miranda is freaking sitting on the bed, clearly annoyed. She opens the light and she wakes up Steve to tell him that. Like this, I would feel some type of way. If you do all of that, if you literally sit up, clearly want to have a discussion about the fact that I'm on your side, I would feel really, really bad. I would really start to contemplate what is my role in this relationship. So Miranda's approach, not the best. Do you think Steve makes it any better? Girl, you know he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Steve kind of wakes up, he looks at Miranda, and he's like, I tell you what, tomorrow I'll go to the store, I'll buy a paint, and we can make a line in between so I can keep off your side.
Go to sleep.
And I want to slap the shit out of him. Can you imagine that response? If Steve hasn't shown you already how he doesn't care about Miranda at all, about her boundaries, about her needs, this is a sign. Can you imagine someone telling you that you're too much on their side and your response is you're overreacting and you just stay in that same position, not moving an inch? No. We cannot accept that. We can all agree that sleeping on my side, not sleeping on my side is not the issue here. Miranda clearly feels suffocated by Steve despite being with him, despite doing this thing, while Steve, despite being patient, he is clearly walking all over her boundaries and inserting himself the way he wants to be. No pun intended. Miranda is obviously not happy by Steve's reaction, and now she even has more to say. But that's not surprising, because when you don't address things, they will come out eventually, okay? We went through this, Mary. You know we did. So she points at all the clothes that Steve has everywhere, and she's like, you need to be a bit more neat. So here's what I think is happening. Miranda is trying to build her case. She clearly doesn't feel like Steve is acknowledging what she is saying, right? Her feeling that he's too much on her side on the bed, he takes it as a joke. So now she needs to prove that not only Steve is taking space in bed, he's also taking her space in the apartment. She's trying to find other reasons, or she's trying to prove him how her feelings are valid. Now Steve sees it a little bit differently. You see, if Miranda would care to spare a drawer for him, then his stuff wouldn't be everywhere. This man, people, it's unbelievable. Mary, can you actually believe this shit? Miranda is a bit confused. You want a drawer? And Steve gets a little bit shy. He even puts his head down in the pillow. He looks at Miranda and he says,
Actually, I'd like to move in.
Huh? Are we on the same planet right now? So if we again revisit his offer of how he is just patient and he loves Miranda and he's just gonna wait for her until she decides, it's all freaking bullshit. He just pushes himself inside her more. And this sounds so wrong when I say it like that. He's just taking over her space even more. Now, not only is he waiting for her to commit, he even makes the ultimate step of commitment. I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't propose, honestly. He just wants to move in. Like, it's ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. And again, it shows how Steve's own insecurities are pushing him to do these things. Like, I'm thinking if he would actually be confident in who he is and what he can offer Miranda, he wouldn't feel the need to assert himself that strongly. He wouldn't feel the need to basically just take over her life and make her feel like they're already in relationship. He would actually have no problem to take it a bit slower if that's what Miranda needs. He's basically making sure that Miranda has no room to actually reflect and decide on her own. Miranda is shooked beyond shooked. Where did this come from? But here's the thing, Steve figured that because they have such a good time together and they basically almost live together, why wouldn't he just move in? Because you are doing it, buffoon. You are making it as though you live together. You are there all the time. You just enter her apartment because you have an extra key that you forgot to give her back. Are we? Steve, what are you smoking? Okay, what are you on, mister? Because this shit is crazy. But here's the thing. You know what I'm thinking? You know what I'm seeing when I see Steve? Steve is playing into the ultimate dream that women have. Isn't that what all women want? For a man to just finally show commitment, for a man to want to move into woman's place. That's it, right? That's it. There's no woman in this equation. Oh, let's chill, okay? Yes, you are your own person, but there are limits, okay? There are levers. And right now, I, Steve, as a man, am extending you the opportunity of letting me move in with you. I'm ready. So by default, you should be thrilled and you should just jump into the relationship with me. Okay. That's how I see Steve is thinking and what is driving his very smart decisions. When it comes to Miranda, again, I still don't understand what the hell is she doing even sleeping with him. I get it. There's a part of she's trying to figure out if she wants to be with him or not be with him. And I guess there's a benefit of being intimate. But then it all comes down to, again, she's a little bit selfish, right? If you're not ready, don't, in a way, lead him on. That's the thing. When we are in fucked up situations, there's always the selfish part that's keeping us there. Miranda gets even more uncomfortable and she disagrees. They just started dating. Like, where's the rush? Why do they need to move so fast? I mean,
Nobody's dying, and I'm sure every book would say that we're not ready. I mean, you're here all the time.
she is obviously stressed because she feels uncomfortable with how Steve is just moving forward when she is not ready. But at the end of the day, Steve is actually there for Miranda and he does understand. Are you freaking kidding me? Did you really think that again he's gonna understand her? No. No, because you know what Steve does? Steve gets out of bed. He will get out of Miranda's way. Exactly. Put up a tantrum so you get what you want. Haven't I mentioned already that Steve is a little bit like a kid? Here's your proof, bitches. Now, this makes Miranda feel, again, obviously bad and guilty. It's okay, let's just take it slow. You don't need to return the key, but just... And then Steve says what every sane person would say in this situation, and I'm clearly being sarcastic.
It's like you're the guy sometimes.
People, I cannot make this shit up. The way this boy flipped it again on how it's Miranda's fault, how Miranda is acting like a man, not acknowledging that she is voicing her real concerns, she is voicing her not being ready, and yet you again poke at that little insecurity and how Miranda is not feminine enough in some way. Oh boy. Aren't you a doll? Aren't you masterful? Manipulative shit. Look, let's be clear here. The fact that Steve is making a fuss about it and shutting it down, it kind of reminds me of another analysis that we did, right? It ends with us, and how Ryle shut down that conversation by storming away. Well, Steve is doing it the same. When he can just walk away and be upset about it, he doesn't have to take any accountability or responsibility for his actions in the relationship, for his flaws, for his shortcomings, because he is mad now. If I was Miranda, I would be like, okay, take some chocolate. It will do you good. I think Steve, on some level, and maybe that level doesn't exist in Steve's existence. He kind of understands that if he actually wants to listen to Miranda, if he actually wants to open the possibility of her sharing why does she have doubts, it means that he will have to address his responsibility in it, how his action led to this. And I guess that's just not something Steve wants to do. This just shows how effed up Steve actually is and how he is very, very misogynistic. Despite Miranda being the best woman he ever met and la-di-da-di-da, the second his insecurities are threatened, the second he is threatened, his manlyhood is threatened, he immediately turns to the man and women discussion. I mean, I guess for Steve, it would be very, very normal that a man needs a space, but a woman actually wants a space and she doesn't recognize that he, a man, wants to be with her? Unacceptable. And people, it works. Yep, it works. Again, I'm not making this shit up. Because Miranda decides to go to a class where she could get more in touch with her femininity, okay? She tries to do some belly dancing, and because her hip doesn't pop the way it should pop, which isn't it very problematic if your hip would pop, but I guess not. And that just makes her feel that she will always be like a guy. She will never be a true woman. No comment. Miranda, at the end of the day, confesses to Carrie that she loves Steve. She really does love him. And that's why it's even more confusing. Like, she doesn't understand what's her problem. Your problem, Miranda, sweetie, is why don't you feel comfortable committing with him? And it's not just this thing that is just hanging over your head and you just like, what is happening with me? Is the code wrong? Pee. No, it's you not addressing the real problem. It's you not trying to understand the real problem. But maybe I'm just a moron because Carrie sees it clearly. Here's the thing. In every relationship, there's an alpha. There's the person who takes more of a charge. And Miranda is that person. And I want to cry. What do you mean? Miranda is not in charge at all, Bess. What do you mean someone is just in charge? She isn't. That's just used against her. Steve is taking control of her life because if it was up to her, things would go a little bit more slowly. But because everyone is used to that Miranda is the person who takes charge and blah, 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 that must be the problem, right? It must just be the problem that she's the type of person who likes to take control, not realizing that right now, that's the problem. Steve is taking away any chance of her controlling her life or this relationship. Also, what is up with this ridiculousness? You see, it's so freaking ridiculous. If a woman needs space, if a woman has boundaries, then she is probably the alpha in the relationship. Dum, you didn't know that? If a woman has a say, she's the type of woman that she needs a certain type of man, okay? Woman with boundaries? Are you sure there's not something dinging below? She probably has an excess of masculine hormones. That's why she's a little bit different. Like, is this what we're going with? Is this what we came to? That's the whole problem with these arguments that are based on gender. Because if you base it on gender, then you totally take away the possibility or the very real reality of controlling behavior. I'm going to put it very nicely. Let's not be stupid. The fact that she is expressing that she actually loves Steve and that she doesn't understand why can't she just commit to him just proves again the theory of her being hurt by Steve and not processing that, not feeling like she can trust him again and being afraid that he's gonna do the same thing, that out of nowhere, something that is her, that is a part of who she is, will be the problem of the relationship and why he cannot really be with her. Because that's what happened in the past, right? He dated her, but then when she was too successful for him, then he stepped away. Not because how she treated him, not because her personality, literally her success. So obviously she has reservations because of it. How will he next time surprise her? Because she has red hair, he's not really into redheads, but he thought he is. She is asked to get into this relationship without any reliance on she herself understanding what is her part in what went wrong before and how they can work on it. Miranda returns home, and this time there is no Steve there. And she kind of doesn't like it. Now, you might say, oh, it's because she actually really wants to be with. Or you might say he did create some kind of emotional dependency, some kind of expectation, some kind of closeness. It's very common when one person is like subtly asserting control in some way and making them like a big part of your life, that then you develop some level of codependency, that suddenly you start to miss them. The problem is that she's going to take that as a reason why she should accept Steve, or she commits to him immediately, or he's not gonna even give her a chance to figure this out a bit more slowly. So Miranda decides to invite Steve for dinner. Now Steve is already at her place and Miranda is running late because she got caught up at work, then she needed to go to the groceries, then the ingredients that she needed weren't there. And while she's explaining all of this, clearly under stress, she drops the jar and everything just goes to shit. Steve is trying to calm her down that they're gonna order pizza, it's not a problem, and Miranda loses it.
I can't do this.
While Steve doesn't see it as a big deal, Miranda sees it as a total failure. She just dropped a jar. She doesn't know how to cook, and
you're here and you saw that and I dropped things, okay?
Okay.
honestly, she looks very destroyed. Not only that, she's also showing us how a woman, despite having her intuition, which is very, very right, there's something that doesn't let her commit to Steve, how can she, despite that, be pushed to not feel good enough just because there are certain expectations imposed on her? You see, Miranda not doing this, not being able to do this thing with Steve is showing that Steve is not the right person. But because everyone around her and Steve himself is playing into this, oh, you're just too independent and blah, 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 she starts to think that there's something wrong with her rather than acknowledging that, no, he is not the right person for you. And honestly, I think a person like Steve would love this. I know these are just characters, but if we play into it, for someone who wants this dynamic or who deep down really believes in this dynamic between men and women and who's the breadwinner and so on, he loves that Miranda actually feels crushed, that she shows him vulnerable side and how she actually doesn't know how to do this. Not because he actually sees her, but because it makes him feel better. Because that's the whole problem with Steve. Steve's problem is, why is Miranda so independent? And he doesn't really know how to deal with it, so he needs to bring her down. And he is actually succeeding at it. He's leaving her the first time because she's too successful and he cannot offer her what she deserves. Didn't result into him actually believing that. You know what it did result into? That's how I see it. Him wanting revenge. In a way, him wanting to prove to himself that no, at the end of the day, he is better than Miranda and she will become dependent on him. I'm probably being a little bit too negative here, but honestly, this is how it looks to me right now. She tells him that she loves him, but she never lived with anyone before and she likes the remote and she is stubborn and she doesn't know how to cook. And sometimes 2 weeks pass before she does her laundry. And he's gonna see all that. And that's what scares her. She doesn't know if she can actually move forward, but she does know that she doesn't want to lose him. Steve hugs her and he says, I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
Man, that's the whole problem. I don't know how to emphasize this anymore. Why am I losing energy on this? Why am I losing my sanity getting upset by this man? Honestly, when I watched this scene, I wanted to puke. And I could not understand how, again, it turned into, from actually acknowledging that Miranda's problem is that she doesn't trust him because of what happened in the past, to Miranda has problem with sharing her space. That's the problem. It has nothing to do with Steve. It's all about Miranda's independency. Unbelievable. If you compare him to Aiden, like Aiden was trying to be a nice guy, Steve was pretending to be a nice guy. As they're hugging, Miranda is crying, and at one point she says, "Look, I'm crying on your shoulder. I guess I am a woman, huh?" Clearly showing that this is her insecurity. She was pushed to this point because people around her keep on telling her that she is not woman enough. And I want to ask, besides having a vagina, what is a woman enough? All in all, this is again all driven by manipulation and not actually healthy agreement, acknowledgement, and coming back together. And Steve, at the end of the day, got what he wanted, because a week later, he moved in with Miranda. But will the two lovebirds stay together? And how will it all go down? Am I actually wrong about Steve? Well, and remember, trust your individuality.